Okay. Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Hope the week has started well for you guys. And after a bit of a break, because I wasn't streaming last week and the week before due to some Well, life things, unforeseen circumstances, but here I am back again. So today or tonight, I'm going to be working on the new Nexus. Hey there, Black Velvet NMO, nice to see you. So those are three quite creepy kids, and I thought I would try to make up for not showing up 2 times in a row by doing a bit of batch painting, so painting 3 miniatures, and the goal here will be to get very solid quality while keeping the pace a bit faster. And I just noticed that there is a bit of a mold line that got stuck to its hand. Now it's gone. And by batch painting, I mean working on the. Oh yeah, I love it too. That's amazing stuff there. Just to give you an example, those are 2 miniatures that I finished earlier, and I was working on both of them simultaneously. And this is about just keeping the right pace, making sure that you work on the same areas, going back and forth between one model to another, and making sure you slow down when you feel like you're beginning to rush things too much. So that's the goal for this stream, just to have a go at those three creepy kids. And I will be using the artwork as reference. I don't think I've seen them painted online yet. And I will treat these two as little twins, so they will have the same color of the dresses and the same color of the hair, while the boy will be treated a bit differently. But I will start with giving them an overbrush of light white, which is something that I typically do. It sets a good canvas, so to say, for following with contrast paints. So I'm starting with putting a rather heavyish dry brush of very light white. It's not pure white because it's like this. The actual name of the color is Manoth White Highlight from P3 range. Any kind of off-white will do here. And the reason I'm not using pure white is that pure white is it's a rather coldish color, and I want some warmth in this definition. And those are really, as you can see, those are really creepy models, because you have this lovely girl dancing happily, and there is this insectoid abdomen protruding from beneath her dress. So that's girl number 1. This is girl number 2. Looks like she's taking a peek at something on the base. So I put some gravestones, actually it's a resin base with tombstones, and there are like insectoid limbs coming from behind her, from her head. So it looks like some kind of mutation is taking place. And again, doing a quick overbrush all over the miniature. You've played them by proxy, and having 5 models costing 30 soulstones for 3 is funny, and 12 activations made my opponent feel bad. Oh wow, I've never faced Nexus, neither the first nor the second version yet. I saw some vassal bot reps with Nexus, seemed extremely oppressive, and I would assume that the new version, while keeping a different style of play, it's still, I think oppressive is the first word that comes to mind. And how did the game go? Your opponent felt bad, but did you manage to get the W in the game? And now I will be starting with Gallimon Flesh. It's a very, very nice color for working with human skin tones. And my goal for painting these three is to make them look kind of normal from one side, and then there will be like huge contrast to those mutated elements. Like this boy, for example, looks like he has some mutated flesh protruding from his neck, head, and he seems happy about it. He's like, yeah, I'm mutating, things are good. You won't just have to keep the new ones spread out and beg for them to proc the parasite tokens. Okay, so I guess resource management comes into play. That must be fun having three masters. Is it a very different game style, would you say, from the first version? So I'm starting with applying the Gallimon Flesh contrast on the skin, and I'm being very careful not to overflow, not to leave pools, because I want an even coat of Gallimon Flesh. Now the happy face of the dancer girl. And since this is such a small area, I need to be quite efficient with brushwork to remove the pooling contrast paints quickly. If I stain the areas around the skin, that's fine, because I will work over them in a second too. And the other arm. Oh, now that you see, it's good to put some contrast, because I just realized that she's wearing a bracelet. Happy little dancer with a bracelet and an insectoid abdomen coming from beneath her skirt. It's kind of like playing the Vix, but not as aggressive. And you have three of them, so you still get the totems. The totems that no one wants to get near to. The totems that are difficult to get rid of, and that you deploy far up field. So yeah, you can start harassing the opponent from turn one with them. And those are the kind of models that the opponent has to do something about, because otherwise they just move up and keep clogging the deployment. So that, at least that was the impression I got from watching a game or two on YouTube. That was with Vassal, of course. I haven't seen them yet on table. I don't think anyone in my area or in my country, to be more precise, plays them yet. But they are still fairly new release. 30 Solstice for free. That's ridiculous. And then you get those heavy hitters, scheme runners, and all that jazz. And then your opponent starts thinking that, okay, what do I begin with? Okay, so the second girl and her skin is coming along nicely. I will then put some highlights on it and maybe add a glaze or two, just to make it look a bit more human, because currently it looks a bit too dark, not realistic. But what the contrast does here is just it clearly gives a hint of where the shades are and where the highlights could be placed. And also those tiny crevices on her forehead. This is a second pair of eyes, so I will work on them with some thing that will make them look glowy red. eyes and ears and use the doctor to make them into berserkers. Yeah, and berserkers are just nasty. Nasty. And then once you get the parasite token on the opponent, well, it's a game over for that model because you can just keep on pinging it. And it's like a vicious circle because you attack enemy models and they just ping your own model for free damage. So, I mean, time will tell because, as I said, it's still a fairly new release. And it hasn't been, I don't think it's been that, I'm not sure if the new Nexus has had such significant presence on the tournament scene, and by tournament scene I mean not only Vassal but also the real in-person tournaments. So I guess it will take a couple of weeks, maybe months, to really see where it ends up in the perception of how powerful it actually is. So what are the challenges for Nexus? What doesn't the Nexus like? Would it be some area effects like blasts or alphas that get Nexus to the master quickly? Just trying to pick your brains, seeing that we have an expert on Nexus here, so that I'm prepared more or less when I see it on the opposite side of the table for the first time. And again, making sure that I don't apply too much of it. Thin layer, takes a while to settle in. And for this boy, because the parts that this boy has mutated, they actually look more like this kind of sick flesh. So I'll just go over them with Gallimon flesh just to create a base tone. And then I will be making it more reddish or purplish. I think that his school uniform, because that's what he seems to be wearing. Maybe it will be purple. So I think I might go with red, with bright red for these mutated parts, but just setting the base code here anyway. Things getting in their face. Yeah, that's what Nexus doesn't like. Okay, noted. But then you can obviously position Nexus in a way that it's more or less protected from aggressive alpha strikes turn 1. So that's the base code for the flesh. And as you can see, the Gallimon flesh is such a good color that already, even after one go with it, it already looks decent. It's already a solid color. So if you want to get your models on the table and you hate painting skin, because it is a bit more challenging, I have to say that it's not, takes some practice. You're good to go. Just put the contrast paint and you're more or less ready. You know, my first impression when I saw this model was that it's kind of flat and boring, but now that the details are more clearly defined, it's a great miniature. Okay, so time to add some highlights, and I will be using, I think it's called Midland Flesh, but this is like this pinkish shade of color that I will be mixing with a little bit of off-white. Well, became more than I wanted, but that's fine. I will add some lemon medium, and this is my little mixing palette. So I have my mix almost ready to go, and I will start with making sure it has really thin consistency. So I'll maybe take away a bit, got a bit too much of medium there. I will mix it with off-white because I'm looking for a really pale color that has a more or less milk consistency, so slightly thicker than water, but still very thin. And I will test it on, why don't I test it on the leg? Yeah, it's quite okay, maybe a bit darker. So a tiny drop of skin tone added to the mix. Then twirl the tip of to get a good tip and resume working. Now I'll be focusing on those areas because the hand doesn't have well-defined muscles like some of the miniatures from Malifaux have. So you need to be quite selective where you place your highlights just to make sure you don't cover the whole surface of the arm. Then clearly let's try to define each of the fingers. And whoever designed those, hats off to you, sir or madam. Because those are some really twisted models. I need a smaller brush for those, for the facial highlights. I will grab my Winsor & Newton Series 7 because it holds paint quite well and it also has a smaller tip. So at this stage I want to focus on making them look as human as possible. Just working on the skin, focusing on those areas which will make them look deceivingly human. And I don't know the fluff of Malifaux Burns. I haven't read it yet. I don't have a book yet. I'm just waiting for it to be available on this side of the big pond before I buy it. Because the shipping costs of larger items, heavier items they get exponentially high the more you order, and books are quite heavy. So I'll give it a read, or maybe if I'll just buy it when it's available in digital version. But what I know about Nexus at this point is that Nexus is quite old. In fact, it's not as old as Malifaux, but I haven't seen Nexus on the table yet. But I dread the day I do. Try to lure away, debubble, and focus as much as I can, but much like games on Halloween, seems like a solid strategy. Keep your distance, lure out key pieces, hope for the best. Yeah, that sounds like a solid strategy going into Nexus for the first time. And things should be fine as long as you don't get the parasite on your key models. Once you get it, it's a slippery slide. So back to the lore section. What I've read on Nexus was that it was initially created by Titania, actually. So she's the mother of Nexus, you can say the creator of Nexus. And she was doing this huge war on tyrants. And and she wanted a network of spies. So she created Nexus, and they were her super efficient servants that were spying on other creatures in the world of Malifaux. So she created this kind of hive mind presence that was able to infect other creatures and spy on them. And there was simple deal. Nexus was never meant to meddle with the Fae directly. So with the Titania people, with her court, with the creatures that were her closest allies. But as Nexus got more of a taste of how other creatures function, it had one flaw, the curiosity. Well, and while curiosity didn't kill it, it landed it in trouble because her, they, not sure what's the right pronoun. Maybe they would be the most appropriate. That's a good question, actually. I think they might be the right call. And Nexus was in trouble because, of course, they started spying on Titania's court. And as punishment, Titania knew very well that makes me oof. Yeah, the Titania model, new Titania model is absolutely amazing, and I cannot wait to get my brush on it. It looks like it has. I just saw some lower quality pictures from the Malifaux Burns book, but they were good enough to show that she will be amazing. And I think she's on 40 millimeter base. Yes, so DC bus. Yep, those are Micro Art Studio inserts. And I also, whenever I work on them, I start by drilling a hole at the bottom, putting a magnet in, because that's how I transport my miniatures. And the new Titania, well, 40 millimeter means that they can just stack more details on her. And seems like she's like coming, her base is partly connected with her body. So she's like moving out from the ground and connected to some trees or something like that, some bushes or roots. Didn't have a close look at that. And as I said, I've never seen it in a good quality. Same in New Rasputin. Oh, I didn't know New Raspi is on 40 millimeter as well. That's interesting. I'm definitely getting New Rasputina because I'm getting New Euripides. So, whether I like it or not, I'm getting her, and I'm probably painting her. I think there will be this discussion of people trading assets. I'm trading Master X for Master Y. But then the enforcer model connecting these two models, well, can be quite useful too. And it's always a good excuse to buy into new faction. So why not? Now I will be making it brighter. And using this kind of approach, you can literally keep the shade of the initial color only slightly brighter and just work your way over the same details again and again. Because with this consistency, you don't risk putting too contrastive highlights. You just add a touch here, a touch to the elbow, a touch to the forearm where you want it to be a bit brighter. Summoner Raspy. Okay. Sounds like fun for Raspy players. Wasn't she a bit of summoner in her second edition version when there were those upgrades you could attach to masters? Or was it maybe I'm thinking of Pandora? Because Pandora was summoning sorrows in the second edition when they were, at least as far as I can remember. So as you can see, those are just two highlights and it's already coming along nicely. But back to some lore on Nexus. So when Titania found out that Nexus was spying on her, or were spying on her, she knew that Nexus cannot be really killed because it can just, using the mites, it can just transmit onto other hosts. So she locked Nexus away. And Nexus has been locked away for ages or a long time. And then when Titania came back to Malifa, when she was brought back from her imprisonment, Nexus woke up, and then someone was doing some exploration. I believe it must have been either, probably Yenza, who uncovered them, and they are back. And they are clearly up to no good. She can summon any living or beast, just the elementals. Okay, that's interesting. So, new summoner in game. Okay. Okay, seems like there was a bit of an issue with connection, but should be good now. So I'm doing a bit more highlighting on the skin, using now this off-white mix with skin based on. So literally now just the most protruding elements like the eyebrows, the cheeks, just leaving a dot there. And smoothing it over the surface. And in a second I will be applying a glaze to kind of bring it all together. Silent on eyes and so forgot December lights. So quite a few options. So I guess that makes Rasputina a much more versatile master than she used to be. I faced Rasputina only once in a tournament, and it was break the line strategy, and I played Zoraida with 2 Silurids with the first mate, and I was just able to kick the cans up so fast that the Rasputina players simply had no means to keep up with me. But then the threat of hitting through the ice pillars was always there, and it made my life a bit challenging. But I guess the first version of Rasputina didn't have a great reputation, to put it simply. So a few highlights more. Now this guy has big cheeks. It looks like he's a bit like bloated. It's funny that you don't really get to see all those details until you've started painting. Because before painting it seemed like a rather flat and not so interesting miniature, but the more highlights I place, the more I begin to appreciate it. That's the boy. And now what I will do is I will mix 2 shades, Rayclan Flesh Shade and Carroburg Crimson. And I will just put a drop of one and another onto the palette. And I will add more of Lamy Medium. And I want to make it very thin so that it's a glaze, not a wash. So here's one way of testing if it's thin enough. Just put it on a blank piece of paper, and you can always test it. For example, on the bottom here. Yeah, it should just bring it all together, make it look a bit more pinkish. Just to give you an idea of more human looking skin. I'll just add a little bit more of Lamy Medium to the mix to make sure it does not saturate the model too much. Now that small was So I'll try to keep the face closer, and as you can see, it doesn't really change the color, but it affects it. It kind of brings the highlights together. So when there were some rough transitions from previous darker shade to the brighter one, it just smooths things over. Now the boy. Oh, there it is. Should be sharper now. I think it loses focus slightly when I switch from one model to another. So if that becomes an issue, just holler at me in the chat and I will keep it slower, because I know that when I rotate it too fast, it momentarily loses focus and I don't want to be... Well, and while I try to monitor it on the screen, I can miss out on the overall loss of quality of the video. Now I think this is actually my favorite model from this box, this boy. They are kind of reminiscent of... He reminds me of changelings, those small boys with wearing some kind of school-like uniform and wearing mask of human skin that look like nasty wounded flesh when they hold it in their hands. Lots of creepy stuff in Malifaux, really, when you think of it. And the third girl, so the second dancer, and I will pause for a second just to get a clear view of the face. Not sure how clear I can get, but the aim was to make sure that the colors are blended together by this glaze. And I'm feeling rather good about it now. So the next stage will be painting eyes, I think. Or maybe I'll start with lips. Painting lips, all you need is basically one color. And I use Emperor's Children, but I guess any pink will do. And that doesn't really matter whether you're working on male or female characters. It works equally well. You can always tone it down slightly with brown, but generally all you need is a thin line of pink. And those are so tiny that my camera is really struggling to pick the details. Here's one happy face. Here's the second happy face. The boy has got some teeth, so I will have a look at them in a second. Just want to make sure I make a thin line of where the lips should be. Maybe overdone it a bit, so I will clean it up with some of the bright highlight for the skin. That's better. And the third one, the curious one. So the boy, the dancer, and the curious one. So I'm really curious, speaking of curiosity, to learn what happens to Nexus in Malifaux Burns, because I read the Explorer's book. It was super nice, probably some of the best fluff I've read, but there wasn't really much about Nexus, about how they are utilized by Explorers Society, who controls them, and how they've... Well, it's indicated that Nexus is fascinated by the breach, so who knows, maybe they are going Earthside. And I don't want people to start spoiling it here, because plenty of people haven't had a chance to read the fluff yet. But if you haven't read and just want to join me in speculating about what's going to happen, then feel free to post your ideas. We don't want to spoil it for those who intend to read everything. Now, maybe before I paint the eyes, I will work on the teeth. So I'll take a light brown, touch of light brown, because the boy has some teeth visible. He's just enjoying becoming one with Nexus, or becoming one of many. Feeling really good about it. Makes me think of this meme with a dog sitting in the middle of fire and saying, "This is fine," sipping tea, while things are burning all around it. So this is like this boy's attitude. This is fine, I'm just a bit itchy. But things are good, everything is going to be well. Yeah, so have I. I just saw the cards because they were all visible. They are all somewhere over Discord, and I think that there might be gathered in one place because Wyrd people were kind enough to just give the green light and say, "Hey, feel free to share. Sharing is caring." And it was a right call, I think, because otherwise people would be just trying to hide them somewhere in the deep corners of the internet, and they would surface here and there again. And that way Wyrd could see people's actual reactions to the new content. I'm just giving a light wash, so to make sure that these teeth don't stand out too much. And onto the eyes. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point, that if Nexus goes Earthside, they may lose some of the power, some of what makes it special. So yeah, that could be a risk. And if they have the capacity to move Earthside, yeah, they are probably already there. That's a fair point. So the way I approach painting glowy red eyes is fairly simple. I start with red, pure red, making sure that, as you can see, I just start moving the brush before I touch the surface of the miniature. And I overdo it a bit because I will go over it with yellow in a second. And it's important to have a good consistency. That's why I'm using Vallejo Air model red, because it's got really thin consistency. It's good for pigs, not good for fate. The new Enforcer. I was actually thinking about it, because once it gets the champion upgrade, It deals extra damage from charging. It's got the trigger built in for putting more damage. So if you invest into it, it can do a minimum of 4 damage, I believe, and 1 from charging. For I don't remember the name of this ability, but it can do a minimum of 4 plus 1 damage if I'm doing my maths right. And it's fairly mobile, so of course good players will see it coming and will block the ways or just lure it away or do something. But I think that first time it can catch some people off guard. I mean the upgrade, the champion upgrade. I would need to look it up because I don't remember. I think Titania can hand 1 per turn and then needs to discard a card to keep it in use at the end of the turn. And it automatically adds suits to the triggers. I don't remember. Someone would have to help us by looking at the card and reminding how it works. Is it only 1? I think realistically, I think that having more than 2 champions is not sustainable because you need to discard 2 cards at the end of the turn and you're not always going to have them. Also, people, once they find out how much better the champions become, they can start attacking the hand rather than attacking models in game. It is up to 2 anyway. Yeah. So the yellow will be next after the red. And I will just make sure that I put the yellow not covering wholly the red area of the eye socket. So I think that the new bore could have some use. Not sure how. Well, we can just theorize about it because the miniature is not released yet and I haven't seen it on Vassal yet. But it has the potential of being this super fast enforcer that can challenge scheme runners and do some surprisingly high amount of damage. So as you can see, hopefully the yellow dots are in the middle of the red, making sure that the red stays visible. The same for the boy. I generally like to start with faces because it's such a focal point, and if I mess something up, I can redo it. Because that's the first, oftentimes this is the first thing that people look at when they see a miniature. So by doing it well at the beginning, I just take the pressure off and I don't worry about handling it closer to the end of the work. All right, and one more. So as I said, doing a bit of batch working, and this one has additional set of eyes growing on its forehead. That's why I've just put some red dots on the red slashes actually, because those are not so even. So another yellow dot. You need to make sure that the tip of the brush is moist. Well, I've overdone it. That's why I want to do it first, because I can just quickly remove it with just damp brush. So hopefully, guys, I'm not blocking the view. Trying to make it visible for you as well. And this one, and also I think that the dancer, those are not eyebrows, this is a second set of eyes that she's growing. Yeah, so let's get back with some red. Put a thin line below the yellow. That's more like it. And this one, I'm just looking at the artwork. Seems like it's also a second pair of eyes on the eyebrows. Wow, this is going to be fun. So somewhere around here is where the second set of eyes should be located. Somewhere around here. I'm glad you used it. The idea of painting eyes. It's not, it doesn't take that much effort, but the results are really decent. Okay, so here's the second set of eyes marked on the dancer. Wow, it just looks weird when you look into her face. There's something that maybe my brain doesn't want to acknowledge. When there is a second set of eyes, I'll just show it closer when I've finished highlighting. And now I will make a mix of yellow with white, which is still on the palette. So it's like off white with a touch of yellow, but still much brighter than yellow. Okay. And now this is a critical stage because all we need is a small dot. So it has to be rather thin and the tip of the brush needs to be firm. There we go. There's one, there's second, third eye, and fourth eye. The concept of third eye is a highly philosophical one, actually. So four eyes is even better. Now the boy. As you can see, the way I try to control, it's just I don't try to focus too much. I just try to approach painting eyes in a relaxed manner. Try to start moving the brush before I touch the surface. Just try to relax. Because when you start focusing on it too much, your muscles tense. You become more tense and your movements with brush you become less flexible. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it, but you just are less efficient. Now a bit too much. Still not too late to redo it with a touch of red. Because we can always fill in the eye socket with red beneath the highlight. Yeah. Again, another argument for starting with eyes and, well, face and eyes. Because it's time consuming, it's a bit challenging, and once you get eyes done, most of other things seem a bit less challenging in comparison. And those are insectoid-like eyes, so they don't need to be perfect. They can be slightly more uneven. A bit too much of white here, so I'm cleaning that up. And now comes the part that again will work as a quick fix. So if there are any imperfections, I'm taking the blood letter glaze, giving it a good shake, and giving the eyes a solid glaze. And by solid glaze, I mean flooding them with it, leaving it for a second, moving on to another one, because I want the red glaze to catch. So right now it looks messy. It looks like a complete failure, but once it has had a chance to settle in for a second, you can gently wipe the brush, remove the excess of glaze, and you get this kind of glow-like effect. But I mean, it's so weird looking at a miniature that has two sets of eyes. It's like, makes me feel dizzy, literally. So that's the boy. Let me try him again. Yeah, that's the boy with... You mimicked it. Nice way of putting that. This is the dancer with two sets of eyes. Yeah, I'm happy that people are using some of the techniques shown here, because that's why I'm doing those streams, just to show. That was my goal from the get-go, just to share what I've learned, tips and tricks to make your life easier, to encourage other people to paint more miniatures. And have fun doing so. And now I think I might do one more thing. If you're feeling confident, you can still use a bit of white, just pure white, to put one more dot on the eye, but it's not mandatory. I mean, if you're feeling up for it. So this is time consuming. We are 1 hour into the stream and I've only painted faces, but 3 faces, so I call it progress. And I think this is something that I said at the beginning of the stream. When working on a few minutes at once, it's important to just pause every now and then and make sure you're still enjoying it, that you're not rushing it too much, because if you start rushing, it's not fun anymore. Okay, seems like there are some technical issues. Hopefully things are working. So now for the next part, I think I will start either doing the hair or the dresses. I think I will do the hair. Why don't I do all of the hairs in a similar way for all of them? So I'm going to use Black Templar contrast paint. This one, I'm going to thin it down a little bit because it's very dark. It's really dark and I want to make sure it's not pure black when I place it on the hair. So I will just put some of it on the palette. And then I will put a drop of Lamy Medium next to it to make sure I can control how much Lamy Medium gets in. And then I'll test it on a piece of paper. Looks good because I want it to be slightly grayish when applied. Transitions from the flesh to the back parts. Yeah, I'm not sure if I will be able to do it during this stream because I think I will tackle the dresses first. But I will. That's why I started with giving this human-like skin to both the human skin and the mutated part, just to have a solid base coat. So the hair, as you can see, if you add a bit of Lamy Medium, it improves the flow. It becomes, the pigment is not that strong, so it becomes a bit more grayish. And when it's gray, you can also work over the hair with some other washes to make it more interesting, like purple. Very light purple wash can do a lot of good for the hair. So this is like framing the face. That's why I started with very bright face and now I'm framing it with dark locks of hair. And this girl has such neat hair. I just make sure that the consistency is right. And when I notice at this stage that the paint pools in one section or another, I just drag it out to the area where there isn't enough of it. Like I do here. I will then work on highlighting it slightly. And this paint is, there's something about this black Templar that it dries quickly. So that's why I have Lamy Medium on hand, just next to it on the palette, and keep on adding it to the base color. Because we want those hair to be black, not gray. That's why I can quickly fix that with a second layer of contrast. But the transitions will be fun to work with. I want to make them really stand out. So I will probably, even after varnishing the miniature, I will be adding some gloss effect to that. So as you can see now, the face is kind of framed. The miniature is really starting to look alive. I just want to make sure that there is not an overflow of contrast in the recesses. So that's why I'm making sure that the brush is not overloaded with contrast paint, and then I can take away the excess. Now the boy. Now this is going to be a slower process than what I would typically do, but please bear in mind that I'm painting 3 highly detailed miniatures, well, not simultaneously, but in a batch, so moving from one to another smoothly. And I'm already working around this mutated skin area, but not really working over it, just around to make sure that the hair stands out a little bit more. And one more lady, the curious girl. And I'm starting with framing the face. And normally when I paint, I listen to audiobooks or podcasts or watch Vassal games. And I can share with you guys that the last batch of audiobooks that I've listened to, it's a funny story because I've never read the Harry Potter books. Maybe because they came out when I was at the university and I was studying English philology, so that meant that I had a lot of reading on weekly basis and I never had time for anything additional. So over the summer period, my daughter had this themed week at kindergarten, and actually it was a themed month, and they were doing some games and activities connected with Harry Potter books. So I read, and my daughter. And the second started getting a bit creepy, connected to compared to the first one. So then we stopped at the second one because I thought the third one could be a bit too heavy. The third one is way more darker, way darker than the first two. Because the first one is basically a fun story about kids going to magic school. Then some bad stuff happens, and then the other books are way more serious. So, and I've just recently finished listening to all 7 of them. I had the Jim Dale recording, and it was a pleasure to listen to. And now when I paint, last week I started listening to Billy Summers, the new Stephen King novel. It's just don't like silence when I paint. So I guess right now I'm just filling the silence with my own voice, as weird as it sounds. And what about you guys? Do you, when you paint, of course, another good thing, another nice thing when I can combine it. So when the kids are asleep, when I'm painting, and when there is a stream, I tend to paint along. So those weird people who stream later into the night, well, from the European perspective, that works quite well. It just feels like it feels almost as if you were sitting next to the person who is working and just painting along. And then, of course, music. But then I used to listen to music only while painting, but then I switched to audiobooks, and that's what I mostly stick with. Takes some getting used to. you can just focus so much on what you're working on that you lose track of what you were listening to. Let me pause for a second to make sure I get good quality again, and the focus is. Hey, that's nice that you're painting as well. That's cool. I find it, yeah, I think I fully agree that it becomes a bit more personal when you listen to other painters talking about what they're up to and you paint along. Just the the two, listening and painting, go hand in hand. Just seems to be working quite well for me as well. And the nice thing is that you really get to interact with the painters on the streams. I do it. I always make sure that I comment on what they're doing, ask them questions, recognize what they're doing, because you become part of the process when you can share your thoughts alongside. So now I will be. This is one nice way of painting her, because you avoid dry brushing, and I mean nothing wrong with dry brushing. Only with such small miniature, it becomes a challenge to get it right, because dry brushing tends to leave the most protruding elements much brighter if it's done in a quick way, and it's difficult really to control the flow of highlights when you do a dry brush. And I do it to pick up the details and use it as a kind of mapping for next stages. And then I may do it here as well. And as I said, there is nothing wrong with this technique. I just, with such tiny miniatures, because these are super small, it seems like dry brushing the hair, risk of putting paint in places where I don't want it to be. And I believe that the whole idea of those painting streams is one of the cool ways that Wyrd has devised to get closer to the community, to bring the community together, because you get to really know much more about people, share some experiences, not only painting, not only connected to painting. So there is one. Let me share how they look at this moment. Well, I'm not sure I can get focus on both. Maybe on one it would be a bit easier. The camera is really struggling because those are so tiny. I may do a quick overbrush with maybe gray, but not necessarily gray. I think I will go with this color, bone white. And I will do a very light and controlled overbrush. Well, a very delicate dry brush just to pick up the finest details. Because if I do it all over the head area, I'll run the risk of ruining the progress on the face. And just focusing on the elements that are closer to the edge. And here I'll just go very lightly over the fringe, just to pick up the detail a little bit. And the curious girl. Just a little bit. Very lightly guiding the side of the brush, a thick brush that I use for dry brushing. And then what I can do to bring it together, yeah, more people. We need more people on the streams, but grateful for those who are here. And we need to bring back this Waldo's wheel for additional challenges. That would be fun. I didn't get to do it last time, so happy to do it this time around when it's up and running. So now I will use a slightly thinned down glaze of purple over the hair, just to again bring it together, add more depth to it, because currently it may look just too dark or too gray. And when you think of black color, when you think of someone who has strong natural black hair or dyed black hair, light tends to reflect in the most surprising way on black. Just think about ravens. They look like they are touched by a rainbow when the sun shines on them. So that's why I want to give a bit more depth to the black color by using a glaze of purple. Doesn't have to be strong, just a very light touch. And the same goes for boy. Now I won't be starting the mutated part until I've finished the cloth, because what's happening on this miniature is that the mutation is literally taking over the body. So if I do it now, I will have a hard time getting the fine details. So I would rather start with the, well, why don't I do the uniform now? And I was thinking about doing it slightly greenish. I can bring the good color for that. Just need to pick it up. That's it. I think I will go with this one. And I'm roughly following the artwork from the box. So that should be all good. Let's look at how it goes on the paper, just to test it before I apply it. That's what I always do. Okay, guess it looks this kind of dark uniform green. So I may get to work on the mutated parts today, who knows? And now I want to be additionally careful, because I don't want that turquoise color to drip over the skin areas. I mean, I can always fix it, but why add myself work if I can avoid it? That's why the sections below require some extra careful treatment. And the second part of his shorts, well, this boy is clearly not graduating, because it looks like a schoolboy uniform, like this old-fashioned type of uniform with shorts. He's got the mites, so no way, no going back now. Okay, now the coat of the jacket. It's such a nice color, makes him look elegant. I'll try to work around those mutated areas, but I will be picking them up anyway. So just making sure I don't go over them too much to make sure there is some separation visible. Now the back. And there's also some mutation going on here. And it's amazing that you really don't get to appreciate how complex the sculpt, the miniature is, until you've started painting it. Because at face value, you just see a boy in a school uniform with something on the side. But then you see the details are so crisp, so well defined. I mean, just look at the hand. So well defined, you can see everything there. And trust me, I've painted my fair share of miniatures, both in resin, metal, plastic, and the level that Wyrd has reached is really up there. They are really up there. It's top notch. Blah blah blah. That's a nice thing to say in the chat. Thank you, Waldobot. Waldo, better get ready for tomorrow. Community wants something new and fun. Wyrd should totally make an nightmare version of Waldo, like Lord Chompy Bits Waldo edition, or some other large creature, Teddy. It would have to be Neverborn. This would only make sense then. And you heard it here first. Not that I know of anything happening, but when it happens, I can take credit for coming up with the idea, although it's not highly, not that original, not a very original idea, really. It's like a logical choice. Okay, so there is the uniform mapped out. I'm saying mapped out because this is just the first layer of contrast that will be highlighted. But I've left a bit more in some areas just to create more shades. Now, while I'm waiting for the contrast to dry, why don't I actually start working on the skirts of those little dancers and the curious girl. The curious girl will go first, I think. So why don't I use pink on it? And she has, looking at the artwork, she has some elements that are Waldosaurus Rex. Wouldn't that be nice? Like the illegitimate son of Malisaurus and finish the sentence, and Widow Weaver. Or, well, Lilith was the mother of monsters, right? So now the Volupus pink for the ladies, for the female characters. And again, I'm being quite careful not to paint over the skin area. While it's still possible to fix it, I don't want to add too much additional work. And this gets the detail quite crisply because it's mainly thanks to the fact that I did this overbrush of white initially, right after starting. It looks very shiny, glossy now, but that's something that well, the contrasts tend to lose the shine as they dry. So that's not something that I'm worried about. I'm more concerned about making sure that I get even coverage. Because there are sections of this dress that are very fancy and that I will bring to pure white, well, almost pure white. And there are those sections which I want to be still pink. And I want to make sure that there are no pools of paint. And again, this is a very good example of things that you don't notice when you look at the 3D render or at unpainted miniature. There are folds of material visible which were not visible prior to applying this color. So there you go for even more design awesomeness. And of course, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't a fan of Wyrd. But I can really honestly say that the quality is really good now. Because the first plastic miniatures were good. They were really decent. Like the first, I think the first boxed sets were Lynch and McCabe. And those were well-designed miniatures, like Sidir. It's a cool miniature that comes in, I believe, 3 parts. But the level of detail just wasn't as good as it is now. Even if you compare McCabe with the Nightmare version of McCabe, and you can quickly see how much the design process and the technology has improved to make printing better, designing better detailed miniature possible. Okay, so we have something going here. think that the bottom I will also, it won't be really visible, but I just don't want it to be white. It's better if it's even the base color, but I don't want to leave anything unpainted. And there I got some paint on the knee, so I will just clean it up with water. I think Waldosaurus Rex would need to be terrifying 13 at least. But its attack should be called not massive jaws, blah blah. Target takes 3, 4, 6 damage, I believe. And then the whoever gets that could say, I just blah blah'd you. Blah blah blah'd you. So there's the first girl, and now on to the second girl. The happy little dancer. Now clearly I've put too much, but it's easier to put too much when I know that I can still spread it evenly over the whole surface versus taking bits on the brush, taking my brush, moving it back and forth between the pot and the miniature, because that way I feel I get more even coverage. So I find it just easier to overload brush with contrast at this stage. And it's still going to require some additional work. But I mean, the good thing about contrast is even at this stage, if you're just anxious to get your miniatures on the board and you hate playing with unpainted models, contrasts just give you an opportunity to quickly get there from not painted to decent level of painting, and you can start playing. What would a Waldosaurus Rex eat? It's a good question. I think gremlins. Why not? Because they are, I mean, they are small, and he could eat one at a time. I think there could be some indigestion issues because of the nasty stuff they eat and drink. So, well, maybe not the best idea. But still, there are worse things to eat than Bayou gremlins, like Akaname. That would be the nastiest thing to eat. Those are like poo demons, and eating them would give even Waldosaurus Rex a heartburn. Now I'm removing the excess of contrast that accumulated in some of the recesses. Still easy to do that at this stage. And again, I will work on the area below the skirt, because here we have this insect abdomen showing through. It's like if you don't glue it, you have a miniature of Pretty Dancer. If you add it to the miniature, you have a creepy model of a mutated kid. And I think I will be able to start working on the uniform in a second because the paint there should be completely dry. So I may get to work on those mutated parts, but I'm not rushing things. I think that the mutation on the boy is different than the insectoid elements on the girls. Because boy has clearly something like mutated flesh, whereas the girls have like clearly defined insectoid parts. Well, nasty stuff anyway. It's just different degrees of nasty. And here it's just difficult to get to that area after I've assembled it this way. Because when I put them on bases, and those are, as Sivas has pointed out earlier, those are from MicroArt, they can add a bit of dynamism to the way you perceive a model. Like here, there's this tombstone, and I've used her position to be suitable for this base. So there is this little girl dancing on the graveyard. Okay, now I think I will start highlighting the suit of the boy. And for that I will use, I think I will use bone white and give a very light overbrush just to pick up the detail, and then work with some glazes. Because there are some nice details on it. And I want a really dry brush, so I'm making sure that you can test it on your fingernail. If it doesn't leave any traces, then you're good to go. Just making sure I get it into focus. Oh, it's a challenge for camera to focus on those tiny, tiny models. Okay, there we go. And it just brings up the detail, the faults in the material quite well. And it's quite safe because even if I get some of it on other areas, it just kind of melts with the overall composition. And it also helps me delineate where I can start working on the mutated part in the next stage. So just a few more brush strokes. Making sure I do it all over the miniature. And then I will take a wash and glaze over it still. Just so that it blends in with the composition better. And the bow tie, I will paint it purple, I think. Purple should work. Now let me just grab what color do I need? I think turquoise wash would be fine. There I have it. All right. This is the ink that I'll be using. But this one has got rather strong pigment, so I want to make sure I use some of the Lamian medium to dilute it, just a drop of that. And then water could also work, but I just feel I have more control if I use lime and medium. So now that lime and medium and the ink are on the palette, I can start mixing it together, test it on the piece of paper to make sure I get the right opacity. Actually, now it's even better. Yeah. And I can apply it on the model. And it still keeps the turquoise color that I want of the uniform. The highlights are visible, but the highlights that I created by dry brushing over it with skull white. Now I'm just evening things up, making sure that the composition is more balanced. More British. And but I think doesn't the Department of Ungentlemanly Affairs have a British bell to it? I think it's got this British vibe of those gentlemen who sip tea and then they go into the action. And these also, the models are designed in that they look really dapper. But it's not a keyword, right? It's just a department of affiliation. Now for the white part of his shirt, I will use Sickly Skin, which is a rather cold shade. And the palette is filling up nicely. I got plenty going already. So maybe now this brush. Just hesitated that for a second which brush to get to work with. And now I will just make sure that I leave some of the white shirt visible. And for the bow tie, I will also pick it up so that it's pure, that it's clearly white. And then it's ready to absorb some purple contrast paint. I think I might add pure ink to some of the recesses just to work over them. For example, here, although I don't see the full art, so I'm not sure if this is part of the jacket or if this is the shirt visible from beneath the jacket, but I will go with the notion that this is the jacket only. So I think a bit darker shade around the buttons. You have the Japanese. Von Schill is from Germany. The Freikorps are not an extension of the German government. They are mercenaries. Yep, they are mercenaries. That's a different story. But one thing about von Schill is, yeah, clearly there is a strong German vibe, the name of Freikorps, but he has a slightly American vibe. You have to admit that he can remind you of Hulk Hogan, especially with this ability, the shirt comes off. And don't tell me it's not a reference to an American wrestler. Well, wrestler. He's more than a wrestler. He's like a celebrity. I'm not sure what's his position now, but back in the day, he was all the jazz. I don't think I've seen Font Shield painted in red and yellow to make him look like Hulk Hogan. That would be fun. So a very light touch of Magus purple of contrast paint on the bow tie. Maybe get a bit darker. Let's see if I mix it slightly. No, I will not go that way. I think I will need a few layers of that. Yeah, that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Malifaux is the richness of cultural, historical references, because this creates a field in which you can also have plenty of artistic opportunities. Like I reflected earlier today when I posted pictures of the last miniatures I painted, that it's all about richness of sources like this one. How does it fit into the steampunk vibe? Well, not really, but when you think about the explorers and things that they discovered while exploring, it starts making sense. So I think that the new faction presents a lot of opportunities. Maybe I will go over the bow tie with shinish purple a little bit. So this gives some additional definition to the bow tie. I'll just draw a few thin lines that will serve as additional shaded areas. And I will bring it up in a second with a brighter shade of purple. That's the one I was looking for. It's magenta, murderous magenta. So any kind of magenta would do. There's some really interesting conversation going on about backgrounds. I think that it's not necessarily the interpretation or lack of knowledge, it's just the vastness of the scope of different themes, nationalities, topics that are represented. It's just easy to lose track of that. I don't think there is a topic that hasn't been really dabbed into at all. Yeah, there are some good podcasts where you can just listen to the whole story from the first book. I need to catch up on that because I read those stories from. I still have the first Malifaux rule book and quite a few more books stocked somewhere, but I haven't really opened them in a while, so I might have forgotten a lot. So adding a bit pink just to the edges to make the bow tie stand out more. Maybe even a touch of white just to have this strong pink color. And speaking of strong pink, this is one of the miniatures I will be painting maybe over the weekend. It's peanut butter jelly time. The grave goo. Another cool idea in the design. Yeah, that's the focus there. Another very nice miniature. Just a few light dots. So as you can see, the getting things like uniform can be quite fast, but when you start working on those finer details, it can take so much time. But I don't mind taking more time to complete those. And I will also do one more thing, I guess. I will just use maybe the Black Templar and slightly work on the recesses just to give a better definition to the suit. So one thin line will go here, another there, and then onto the buttons. And the buttons will be probably either silver or gold. I haven't made up my mind yet. Or bronze. I would need to look at the color wheel and reflect on best complementary color to have there. And also I think that this area could be fine to separate better. Okay, now maybe a bit more white to the shirt. Okay. Now let's see if I can get a clearer view of this one. I think there are there may be too many bottles around in the area, and the camera starts to focus on them as well. So here's the boy. Now I think I will start working on the skirts a little bit more now. Or maybe the mutated skin, why not? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the color that I started to paint the skin with, which is Midland Flesh from P3 range. But it doesn't have to be this specific shade, just a pinkish type of skin tone. And I will make sure I pick up all those mutated lines because I want them to look like an extension of the skin tone. So that's why I will start with the base work of the same color. So when painting miniatures, you often take a step back or 2 steps back to take 1 step further. But it's something that you should be willing to accept because it's part of the process. looking back, taking a step back, reevaluating things. There are quite a few lines going on here. And I will want to make sure that at the end those elements have this glossy finish. So I will probably use this blood effect on them, maybe water it down, or just use a separate gloss varnish on this section. There are just those vein-like things going on his back. Okay, so this is it, more or less defined now. And now it's time to really start making it look different. But before I start applying glazes, I will make sure that the base coat is solid. Then I will place a few highlights and then the glazing time. Because glazing, when worked on borderlines like the borderline between face and mutation, they can help in making the transition from one section to another rather smooth. And I want to have this natural gradient to this unnatural mutation. Good evening, Future Maniac. Thanks for joining. So to make it brighter, I will just add a touch of sickly white. And use a brush, mix them with brush and apply them straight on. So what I want is a sickly white with a slight touch of this base coat and just very gently picking up the details now. So the question to those of you watching, have you already received your Gen Con orders and have you painted anything from those? Curious what was the most popular choice this year. I'm still waiting for my Insomniac Dreamer, and I'm really eager to start working on Lady Yuma. I saw Ben painting her and during the streams, and he did her justice. You can find it in the archive on YouTube and also on his Instagram. Really nice model. Not that eager to paint the new Dreamer, but the new Enforcer there, the Lady Yuma, it's really interesting. So now I will start working on separating the mutated part by using Cardboard Crimson. And in order to make the transition smooth, I will mix it a little bit with Lamian Medium, because this will keep it a bit more opaque, and this will also make sure that the transition is very smooth. So as you can see, it's barely visible when I put it on the paper. I will make it a little bit stronger, and then I can start applying it to the model. Carboy Crimson is this nice shade of purple that's not that violet. It has a slightly brownish reddish look, and it will work well as a shade for this section. And I'm a bit more generous with shades because I want this to look like something is wrong. Because from this side, it looks almost good, but clearly when you turn the miniature, you immediately notice that there's something very wrong going on. I just heard something at the door, and it's my cat wanting to be part of the stream as well. It was one of the challenges in the Wyrd, so this is my guy. He is all about cuddles, so he'll probably spend the rest of the stream sitting in my lap. His name is Boycott, and the fun thing, it's a play of words because kot is a Polish word for cat, and boycott is the same word as boycott in English. So he's a cat that boycotts things. So now I'm tinting it more with stronger shade of purple, because I think it works quite well on those mutated bits. But as you can see, when I'm tinting it darker purple, I'm moving away from the face so that the transition is visible there between the human skin and the mutated skin. I don't want to get it over here. I just leave a few millimeters of separation. So now I will, while the paint dries, I'm using the pure shade without any medium, without any lamine medium, and move closer to the edges. And that way I create this kind of natural gradient that will be like this smooth transition from the base color, from the human skin color to the mutated side. So let me bring it closer. So as you can see, hopefully, the area of this mutated flesh closer to the skin is not fully purple, but it becomes gradually more and more purplish and darker the further away from the main body it gets. Wow, that's some kind of nice setup that you have for your Through the Breach story. I've never played Through the Breach, but I'm not really big on roleplay games. Haven't played them in ages, but heard good stuff about Through the Breach from friends who tried it. So I'm again putting some darker spots on the mutated flesh area that will be gradually getting darker and darker as they move away from the main body. And I will go with shyish purple now. Because it's got a much stronger pigment. And I'm not really even waiting for paint to fully dry. Just want to make sure that it's along the edges of the mutations, like the most protruding elements, creating some depth there. But I think that that's what I heard from one of the Wyrd podcasts on the Third Floor Wars, that the guy who runs it, he runs a lot of sessions online because that's become a thing apparently. Have you tried doing that? Maybe that would make it easier to get different people in one place, even if it's virtual, unless being physically in the same location is essential for Through the Breach. And then I will add maybe some gore effect. I will need to reapply it after varnishing because it's super glossy and I want to keep the gloss in. So for now I'll just use it to kind of map it and use it as a filter between light blue, light purple and dark purple. And as I said, this will need to be reapplied to make sure that it stays glossy. But it's already beginning to look like some really nasty stuff is going out. of his body. Let's see if I can get a clearer view of him. Yeah, that's a bit clearer. And as you can see now, hopefully the skin closer to the face, it doesn't seem that affected, but the further it gets, the more inflamed the skin looks. That's at least that's the kind of look I was going for here. Maybe a touch of red closer to the cheek. Just a little one to show that something is going on closer to the face. So that's how I'm approaching the mutated skin part. That's what Kimberly was asking initially, hoping to see that. So hope you're happy with how it came out, how it turned out. Yeah, thank you, Kyle. So that's the boy, and those are the girls. I think that the girls I will focus more on them because the skirts are just one glaze of pink. They need some work. The boy is, I would say, mostly done. Still, the buttons need to be finished, and the shoes. Hey, glad you like it. Still some work to do, but for one we have a couple more minutes left, so I think I will start already on the skirts because the plan is to get the colors in, maybe put a bit of a dry brush just to have some kind of mapping going on before the next stages. Now preparing the brush for action and just lightly working it over the front of the dress, making sure. And I mean, I've said it again, I've said it before, and I will say it again that it's no secret that I'm a fanboy, but I do appreciate the level of detail that's in here. Just when you think about it, look at the size. It's like the whole torso is like smaller than my fingernail of my little pinky, and they still managed to put the folds of the blouse of the upper section of the dress. It just blows my mind how well it is designed. It's just a pleasure to work on such high quality models. So the dress is beginning to look, and also the dress is beginning to look much brighter, but also when you think about how material folds, even when you think about dark clothes, when you look at in daylight at any kind of piece of cloth that you see on another person when the folds naturally create, there is such a big contrast between the folds that are closer to the that are up and the recesses. It's like black and white. That's why having this kind of map of extreme highlights will be very helpful as I continue working. I would say that the main challenge with these miniatures so far has been just not necessarily assembling them, but pinning them to the bases, because I always add a metal pin to the foot or to both feet. So that's been a bit challenging because the feet are rather tiny. But I want to make sure I get them the pins because I glue them to the resin bases. So I want the connection to be strong. So there's the curious girl. And there's something about looking at those two sets of eyes that makes me feel uncomfortable, dizzy. Just seems so unnatural that my brain says no for some reason. Now these contrasts look a bit rough, but they will be smoothed over with some more glazes. So I will be wrapping things up in a few minutes. So let's maybe talk about what's up next, because I will not be working on these models off camera. I want to make sure I complete them like I did Lucius, all in the streams. And I need some more time for completing them. So for this guy, we started with the skin on all of them and the eyes and hair. So those are all there. Now for this guy, the next stage will be painting his boots. I think I might go with the same color with dark black, with just black on the shoes. That might be, or maybe dark brown. He will get dark brown shoes. So for him, just the shoes and the base, which should be rather quick job. And these will require some more work. Hey, Mattia, good to see you, mate. How are things in Croatia? Hope you're all doing well there. Really miss out not going to tournaments in Croatia. Some of the best Malifaux memories. And we did get to play. I still remember I think I faced you when you were playing Ulix. That was fun. Fun times in Croatia, for sure. So for the twins, as I call them, I will work on making the surface of the dress much smoother, because right now those are quite strong contrast. It's pure white and dark pink, and I want it more even. And then all those little details, ornaments, maybe dark, maybe black shoes. And the trick here will be to find a way to put the insect elements look quite more contrastive to the overall composition. So the plan for next stream is to finish the boy, then finish the human element of girls, and then work out a way to make sure that those mutated elements stand out and look quite contrastive. And I don't think I will be doing much more today. Because I don't want to finish halfway through. Yeah, thanks for sharing actually the blog. I haven't really updated it in months, but if you want to connect with me, then I think what the foe on Instagram is the easiest way. But yeah, fanciness. Thanks for staying on the stream. Have a good evening, night, afternoon, wherever you are. And keep on happy painting. I look forward to continuing work on these. I will set them aside. Before maybe on the next stream I will be able to show you some finished work, because I will be, in the meanwhile, I will be working on Intrepid Effigy and on the Grave Goo, and maybe on some other stuff as well. I have plenty of Explorer stuff to complete. But for now, for today, it's a wrap. Thank you guys, and till the next one.